These are all of the cards that you can use to stop prank kids. What's going on, guys? Super Insane 18 here, and quick disclaimer, obviously these are not all of the cards that you can use in order to stop prank kids, but they are just some of the ones that I think are the most relevant in today's meta, so let's go ahead and jump on in. So we're going to go ahead and start with the effect negations, so we are just going to go in order that it is laid out here. You can see starting off with Effect Veiler, this is mostly just to stop, let's say, like the Rocket Ride or the Dodo-Doodle-Doo, which honestly isn't that great. Veiler doesn't really have much use against this deck. There are some choke points, like I said, the Rocket Ride and the Dodo, where it can come in handy, but for example, if you like Veiler the Dodo, they can just use the Fancy to send whatever Dodo was going to add, hard make a second Dodo, and then when they use the effect to tribute, just add back the card that they wanted to add anyway. So Effect Veiler, Impermanence, and Ghost Mourner are kind of the same in that aspect, but we'll talk about those when we get there. Now, the Psyframe Gear Gamma is one of the stronger options because not only can you stop the same things that Veiler can stop, you can also stop the effect of the kids when they summon when they're linked or fusioned away. So if your opponent's going first and they link away a kid, you can use the effect of Gamma to prevent them from summoning another kid, and that is honestly probably the most crucial choke point for this deck, is preventing them from getting that first kid summoned, which is why Ash Blossom is so good as well, because it's the same exact thing as Gamma in that instance. If they link it away, you just Ash the effect that they use when it hits the grave, and congratulations, they're done summoning. Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion is a little bit different because it stops them later on in the combo. Again, it's mostly for the Rocket Ride and the Dodo-Doodle-Doo. If they use the effects to tribute to either summon or add respectively, you can Ghost Bell them, and it really just makes them waste the materials that they used and kind of stops them. It really does depend on what they have as well, but I mean, that can be said for anything that you're going to use to stop your opponent. Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, in my opinion, is the better of the three cards that I compared, being Effect Veiler, Ghost Mourner, and Infinite Impermanence. The reason I think this is better is because not only do you get to negate either the Rocket Ride or the Dodo-Doodle-Doo, but then if they use it for link material or anything else, then they will get burned as well. So even though none of them are really that great, if you're dead set on playing one, I would probably play the Mourner just because you get a little bit extra utility out of it. Now, for Skullmeister, it's pretty much the exact same as the Gamma and the Ash in the aspect of you are going to use it to prevent them from summoning that first kid. Once they link away the kid and use its effect, you are going to be able to Skullmeister it, negating the effect that activated in the graveyard, and that will prevent them from summoning another kid. Now, Call by the Grave, again, essentially the exact same as Skullmeister. The only difference between Call by the Grave and Skullmeister is that if you're going to bank on Call by the Grave, you have to go first and set it. So, whereas Skullmeister, whether you go first or second, you can keep it in your hand and use it at whatever optimal time you need to. Call by the Grave would have to be set first in order to be able to stop them. But, I mean, everybody's playing Call by the Grave because it stops hand traps as well, so pretty much just know that you can use this to stop your opponent's prank kids. And then last, Infinite Impermanence is pretty much the exact same as Effect Veiler. A little bit better because it's not limited to your main phase, but same exact thing. You're really only going to be using it to stop either the Rocket Ride or the Dodo-Doodle-Doo. Moving on to our summon prevention cards. Again, we're just going to go through them in the order that they are laid out. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherry can be pretty good just because you are able to get rid of your opponent's Meow. For those of you that were playing before we got Meow, you know that Prank Kids wasn't a top contender deck until they got Meow because it made every single Prank Kid into a one-card combo. So, as soon as they normal a kid, before they can link it away, if you Ghost Reaper the Meow, it pretty much just puts a massive damper on their plan. Granted, Ghost Reaper is one of those cards that I personally just don't like. Anytime that I've used it, it's never paid off. But specifically against Prank Kids, it is very strong. And the same can be said for the Gnome material, for the exact same reasons. Once they summon, you can hit one of their main deck kids, and then they're done. So, I think, if I remember correctly, the Gnome material has to be used on a monster that is special summoned. I could be wrong there, I'm not going to move it to read it right now. But essentially what that lets you do is when they normal a kid and go into Meow, the kid will summon another kid from deck, and then if you Gnome material that kid, they're done. They can't use that kid for anything else, meaning that they have no way to continue extending their plays because they need to be able to either link or fuse that kid off in order to be able to get another special summon. So, Gnome material is one of those cards that you can easily side against your opponent when they're playing Prank Kids, and it will pretty much just stop their turn. Now, the exact same thing can be said for Contact C, but you don't need to wait for the special summon. As soon as they normal summon, you can Contact C. Now, the only real way that they have out of that is if they have one of their fusion cards in hand, as well as another Prank Kid, because then they'll have to go into like a Rocket Ride, and you're turning their 1-card combo into a 3-card combo to set up a mediocre board. Because even if they're playing a generic link to out contact C, typically speaking it's going to be something like a Nightmare Phoenix, which doesn't point down, and they can't use that to link into any of their other Prank Kids monsters. So outing the contact C is going to be very difficult for them, and even when they do it, they're not able to set up a great board. Nibiru the Primal Being is one of those cards that I personally think is not very good just because a lot of decks have ways to play around it, the exception being Prank Kids. If you Nibiru them, there isn't really much that they can do unless they have an absolute godly hand. Pretty much any time after their 5th summon. There isn't really a opportunity that I think is the best time to Nibiru. Once you feel that you can just Nibiru to get your opponent to stop or do whatever, just go for it, honestly. That's pretty much all that needs to be said. Moving on to the Gameciel. Gameciel is pretty much just the stand-in for any kaiju. Now, the reason that this is good is if your opponent doesn't shotgun like the Bow Wow Bark on your standby, you can Gameciel it and they lose out on the materials that they need in order to make the Butler. Alternatively, if they already have a Butler set up, you can Gameciel them just so that you don't have to worry about the Raigeki. So anything that tributes, so this is pretty much just, like I said, the stand-in for kaijus, lava golem, anything that's going to tribute what your opponent has just to prevent them from continuing to wreck your board. Now, the next 2 cards are pretty much one and the same, Artifact Scythe and Artifact Sanctum. This is self-explanatory. If you are going first and you can set this up, you are going to prevent your opponent from being able to special summon from the extra deck. If they can't summon from the extra deck, they're pretty much dead in the water. There's literally nothing that Prank Kids can do without their extra deck, so there's that. Now, moving on to the Dimensional Barrier, this card is a card that definitely fell off when links were added into the game, but because you can still stop fusion summons, then it's pretty good. If you're going first, you can prevent them from going into their Rocket Ride, which is a very important extender for their turn. You can prevent them, like if they activate, let's say, Pandemonium, and you have this already set, you can call Fusion, and they pretty much just lost out on their Pandemonium. Really just a way to prevent them from getting off their fusions, because without their fusions, there isn't much they can do. For Gozen Match and Rivalry, they are the same coin, different sides. One will prevent them from having multiple attributes, one will prevent them from having multiple types. That's pretty much the name of the game when it comes to Prank Kids. They are all different attributes, they are all different types. If you lock them into one, there really isn't much that they can do. And lastly, for the summoning prevention, we have Summon Limit. This is a very good card if you are going first to side in against them, just because it prevents them from summoning more than twice on a turn, and it does watch summons that happened before it was activated. So you can keep this set and activate it after your opponent's second summon. It will notice that 2 summons were already done this turn, and they cannot go any longer. So it's really just a way to prevent them from comboing off, because they are pretty much just required to summon multiple times in a turn, way more than 2. This card is just actually kind of insane. Moving into our back row hate, really the only back row that you need to worry about as far as Prank Kids is concerned is their Pandemonium. So cards that are quick plays or cards that will prevent them from activating it are definitely where you want to go. Denko Sekka is a very good card just because if they have the Pandemonium set, if you don't need your normal summon, obviously there are some decks that are way too normal summon reliant in order to run Denko, but if you don't need your normal summon, you can normal summon the Denko. They are no longer able to activate that Pandemonium. Even if they want to chain, because the summon was successful, they cannot activate it. The only way that they can chain to the summon of Denko is if they're activating a card that negates the summon. Pandemonium doesn't do that, so there you go. Anti-Magic Arrows is honestly a little bit of a meme. I think it's actually kind of cool just because it is a quick play. It's much better than a card like Evenly Matched in this variant, because if you evenly matched your opponent, they can still leave their Pandemonium face down, and if they have the materials in their hand, they're still able to Butler you. Versus the Anti-Magic Arrow, you go draw, stand, main, battle, you activate it, and they're done. They cannot respond to it, they cannot activate their Pandemonium, and even though you're not clearing their field like Evenly Matched, you are stopping the Pandemonium, which is their most important card on your turn. Quick plays like the Cosmic Cyclone, Mystical Space Typhoon, and Twin Twisters are a given. Pandemonium does have to activate during the main phase, so if you can get rid of it on the draw phase or standby phase, then you're good to go. They have no way of going forward with it, and the same can kind of be said for Nightbeam. Even though it's not a quick play, they are not able to respond with the card that you target, so unless they have something else to chain to the Nightbeam, they're still pretty much out of luck as far as Pandemonium is concerned. Anti-Spell Fragrance and Imperial Order are more so if you are going first. You would side them in just to prevent your opponent from activating any of their spells, so this would mean like their Place, their Pranks, their Pandemonium. These pretty much stop all of their spells that are very important to their combo. Anti-Spell Fragrance, because it says that they can't do it until the end of the next turn, they still can't even Pandemonium. So if they set the Pandemonium, they can't activate it on your turn. They have to wait until their next turn in order to activate it, so you're pretty much turning it off for 2 turns actually. And then Imperial Order is Imperial Order. Honestly, I can see this card getting banned in the future. Just the fact that it says no to every single spell at such a low cost, I mean, that's really all that needs to be said. And last but not least, we have these 3 cards that I'm going to classify as miscellaneous, just because they don't necessarily fall into any of the other 3 categories that we've established, and they are cards that I just think are absolutely incredible. So Dimension Shifter is a pseudo macrocosmo, and the reason it's pseudo is because it isn't permanent. It only lasts for 2 turns, so the turn you activate it and the next turn. Granted, this can hinder you. It's not as bad as something like macro, because if you macro, then until that card leaves the field, you're banishing your stuff as well. So I do think Dimension Shifter is a better call than macro, especially since it's also a hand trap, so you can side it in if you're going second, and it will just prevent them, because all of the Prank Kids monsters need to go to the graveyard in order to activate their effect. So if you Dimension Shifter as soon as they summon a card, then you're pretty much good to go. If they link it off, they're not going to get the effect, and that's that. Chain Disappearance is a pretty cool one because it stops 3 of the 4 Prank Kids, and funny enough, it's the 3 most important ones. Fansies, Dropsies, and Lampsies. Anything that is 1,000 or less, you can just activate Chain Disappearance. It will banish it, as well as all copies of that card from their deck. So if they normal summon Dropsies, you can just activate Chain Disappearance and banish every copy of Dropsies. So now not only are they just 3 Prank Kids down, they can never make Butler, and they can never gain life points, and that's just honestly incredible, because a big win condition for Prank Kids is just sitting there and stalling while they gain life points and make you lose life points. So Chain Disappearance is a pretty cool card, definitely something to consider if you are siding it. And finally, we have Different Dimension Ground. Same as Dimension Shifter, it is a pseudo-macrocosmo where any monsters sent to the graveyard that turn are banished instead, so it doesn't really keep you locked out the way that macro would, and if you are going first, it is definitely something worth siding, again, because the Prank Kid monsters need to go to the graveyard in order to activate their effects. And just to end the video off, I wanted to take what I think is the best from each of the 4 categories that we've established and kind of go over why I think it's the best. I do have some notes on my screen, so I'm going to be looking at that. But as far as the effect negation goes, Ash Blossom is definitely what I consider to be the strongest out of what we've shown, just because of the sheer number of cards it can stop. Out of all of the effect negators, it stops the most cards, being any of the main deck Prank Kids Place, Prank Kids Pranks, and Dodo-Doodle-Doo. So something that I noticed while playing Prank Kids and while playing against them is that if you let them just continuously resolve pranks, the essentially Daigusto Emerald of the deck, then they're just going to win. They're going to out-resource you, they're going to out-grind you. So not only can this stop the most important choke point, which again is that first kid's effect to summon another kid, but if you see it later on in the game, it's also just insane because you can stop their pranks, and that pretty much gets rid of any sort of recursion that they have. So I think Ash Blossom is definitely the strongest of the effect negators, and that's why it's here now. Contact C is definitely a card that I slept on. As far as the summon preventers go, then it's just honestly crazy, because yes, you're giving them a pretty decent monster. I mean, 1522 is nothing to scoff at, but they really don't have a way to get rid of it. Again, most decks aren't playing generic 2s other than cards like Nightmare Phoenix, and if they have the Phoenix, there isn't much else that they can do to extend further. So Contact C is definitely a very good card, and honestly, even though it's not necessarily Prank Kids, just having it for other matchups as well warrants the space in your side deck. So Contact C can be devastating against Prank Kids, definitely worth the spot. Now, Cosmic Cyclone is probably the best of the back row hate just because it banishes instead of just destroying. It is a quick play, you can banish the Pandemonium. This means that cards like Prank Kids Pranks and Dodo-Doodle-Doo will not be able to recycle it, so just getting rid of it permanently. Honestly, the cost of 1,000 doesn't really matter. Life points don't matter at all until the game is over. And lastly, Dimension Shifter. Just because it's a hand trap instead of a regular trap, it means that whether you're going first or second, it's not necessarily dead, because you can hold it and use it. If you're going second, then you can still use it on your opponent's turn 1, banishing their kids and preventing them from playing the game. And there you guys have it. Those are the cards that I think are crucial to stopping prank kids. Their biggest choke point is that first effect to summon another kid from deck, so anything that can really stop them from getting there, whether it be an effect negation, a summon prevention, or anything else that I showed you in this little video, hopefully that's a little bit of information that you can use in order to beat them at your locals or even in a bigger tournament. So if you guys liked it, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and maybe consider backing me on Patreon. The link is in the description. Make sure to share these videos with your friends, and I will see you guys next time.